What if the reason people don't take you seriously isn't your talent, your background, or your opportunities, but one invisible rule you're breaking every single day? What if I told you that respect is not about speaking louder, dressing sharper, or proving you're smarter, but about one quiet decision you make in moments no one applauds? Here is the rule: never negotiate your values for approval. The moment you trade who you are for acceptance, people feel it. They may smile, they may clap, but deep inside something shifts. Because human beings have an instinct. We can sense when someone is solid and when someone is performing. If you want to change how people see you, stop trying to be seen. Start standing for something. Most people wake up asking, how do I make them like me? Leaders wake up asking, what do I stand for today? There's a massive difference. When you constantly adjust your words to avoid discomfort, when you laugh at jokes you don't believe in, when you say yes because you're afraid to say no, you slowly teach the world that your boundaries are flexible. And people don't respect flexible boundaries. They test them. But the second you calmly say, no, that's not aligned with what I believe, without anger, without arrogance, without apology, something powerful happens. You become predictable, and predictability builds trust. Trust builds respect. Think about the people you admire. It's not that they're perfect, it's that they're consistent. You know where they stand. Even if you disagree with them, you trust them. And that trust makes them powerful. There was a young professional who kept getting overlooked for promotion. Smart, capable, hardworking, but invisible. Why? Because every time leadership shifted direction, he shifted with it. Every opinion in the room became his opinion. Every strategy became his strategy. He thought adaptability would make him valuable. It made him forgettable. One day during a meeting, he respectfully disagreed. Not emotionally, not defensively. He simply said, I understand the strategy, but based on our data, I believe this direction could hurt us long term. The room went quiet. For the first time, people leaned in. Not because he was loud, but because he was anchored. From that day forward, he wasn't just another employee. He was someone with a backbone, and backbone changes everything. The rule is simple, but it's not easy. Stop negotiating your values for approval, because the world doesn't respect who you pretend to be. It respects who you consistently choose to become. Let me tell you why this rule is so hard to follow. From the time we are children, we are rewarded for fitting in. Smile when they smile, agree when they agree, don't rock the boat, don't make it uncomfortable. Approval feels safe, rejection feels dangerous. So we learn to adapt ourselves to the room. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you chase approval, the less people trust you. Because when your identity changes depending on who you're standing next to, people can't figure out who you really are. And when they can't figure you out, they can't rely on you. And when they can't rely on you, they can't respect you. Respect is not built on likability, it's built on reliability. Think about this. Imagine a bridge that changes its structure every time the wind blows. Would you walk across it? Of course not. You need to feel that it's solid, that it won't collapse under pressure. People are the same way. When pressure enters the room, conflict, deadlines, criticism, most people shrink, they soften their stance. They dilute their words, they become smaller versions of themselves. And everyone else unconsciously notes it. But the person who remains calm, who stays aligned with their principles, who doesn't attack but also doesn't retreat, that person becomes the emotional anchor of the room. And anchors don't chase validation. I once worked with a leader who was not the most charismatic person in the company. He wasn't the loudest, he wasn't the funniest. But when things went wrong, everyone looked at him. Why? Because he never changed based on pressure. His values were clear. Integrity first, people second, profits third. And he lived it consistently. When he said he would protect his team, he did. Even when it cost him politically, even when it slowed results. And because of that, his team would run through walls for him. He didn't demand respect. He demonstrated alignment. That's the difference. When your words and actions match over and over again, people relax around you. They stop questioning your motives. They stop testing your boundaries. They start trusting your decisions. But the moment you say one thing and do another, the moment you compromise your standards to stay comfortable, you plant seeds of doubt. And doubt is the enemy of respect. The rule is not about being stubborn. It's not about arguing every point. It's about knowing what you stand for before the pressure comes. Because when the pressure arrives, you won't have time to decide who you are. You'll reveal who you've already chosen to be. Now let's go deeper. There's a powerful difference between reacting to the room and responding from your identity. Most people react. Someone challenges them and they immediately defend. Someone disagrees and they immediately soften their position. Someone criticizes them and they either attack back or collapse inward. That's reaction. That's survival mode. But when you know your values, you don't react. You respond. And response comes from clarity. Clarity about what you believe. Clarity about what you tolerate. Clarity about what you will never compromise. When you walk into a room without that clarity, the room defines you. The loudest voice wins. The strongest personality dominates. And you adjust accordingly. But when you walk into a room with clarity, you don't need to dominate. Your presence speaks before you do. Let me share something subtle but powerful. Confidence is not the ability to convince others. It's the refusal to convince yourself that you are someone you're not. Read that again in your mind. When you pretend to agree just to avoid tension, you feel it inside. When you say yes but mean no, your body feels it. That inner tension leaks out in micro expressions, tone shifts, hesitation. and people sense it. Human beings are wired to detect inconsistency. We may not consciously understand it, but we feel it. And when people feel inconsistency, they instinctively lower their trust. Now think about the opposite. Imagine someone who calmly says, I see your perspective, but I view it differently. No anger, no sarcasm, no fear, just calm conviction. You may not agree with them, but you respect them. Why? Because conviction signals strength. Strength signals safety. And safety builds trust. There's a woman early in her career who constantly downplayed her ideas. She would start sentences with, this might be stupid, or I'm not sure if this makes sense. She thought humility made her approachable. What it actually did was signal doubt. One day, a mentor pulled her aside and said, stop apologizing for thinking. That sentence changed her life. The next meeting, she presented her idea without disclaimers. She said, based on our research, here's what I recommend. Clear, direct, calm. The reaction was immediate. Same idea, different delivery, completely different perception. Nothing external changed. She stopped negotiating her confidence for comfort. And when you stop shrinking yourself to fit the room expands to fit you. That's the power of this rule. It doesn't make you louder. It makes you solid. And solid people are impossible to ignore. Let's talk about the moment that truly tests this rule. It's easy to stand by your values when everything is going well, when people agree with you, when there's no risk. But the real transformation happens when holding your values costs you something. That's where most people fold. Because when there's something on the line, your promotion, your reputation, your relationships, you feel the pull. The temptation to bend, the urge to say, maybe this one time doesn't matter, but it always matters. Every small compromise sends a message to your brain. It says, my values are flexible. And once your brain believes that, it becomes easier to bend again and again, until one day you don't even recognize yourself. There was a manager offered a huge opportunity, higher salary, bigger title, more visibility. But there was one condition. He would need to quietly support a decision he knew would negatively impact his team. No one would know he disagreed. No one would question him. It would be smooth. He spent a sleepless night thinking about it. Not because he didn't want success, but because he knew success built on silent compromise feels hollow. The next day, he respectfully declined. He explained his reasoning clearly and professionally. He didn't attack anyone. He didn't dramatize the situation. He simply said, I can't support something that harms the people I'm responsible for. He lost the promotion, but something far more valuable happened. His team found out. And from that day forward, their loyalty multiplied, their effort increased, their trust deepened. Years later, when a bigger opportunity came, one aligned with his values, he was the first person recommended. Short-term loss, long-term respect. This is what people misunderstand. Standing by your values does not always give you immediate rewards. Sometimes it gives you immediate discomfort. But character is built in discomfort. When people know you cannot be bought by convenience or intimidated by pressure, they treat you differently. They speak to you differently. They rely on you differently. Because you've proven something rare. You've proven that your identity is not for sale, and that kind of stability is magnetic. The world is full of talented people. It's full of intelligent people. It's full of charismatic people. But it's starving for consistent people. When your principles stay steady, even when circumstances shake, you become a reference point. Others measure themselves against you. That's influence. Not loud, not aggressive, quiet, unshakable. And it begins the moment you decide that approval is temporary, but integrity is permanent. Now let's address something deeper. The fear behind all of this. The fear isn't that people won't respect you. The real fear is that if you stop adjusting yourself, you might lose people. You might lose friends who only like the agreeable version of you. You might lose colleagues who preferred you quiet. You might lose opportunities that required you to stay small, and that's terrifying. But here's what most people don't realize when you lose people. Because you stood by your values, you didn't lose alignment. You lost attachment. And attachment is not respect. If someone only stays in your life when you bend, that relationship was built on convenience, not conviction. There was a young entrepreneur who constantly underpriced his work because he didn't want clients to think he was too expensive. Every time someone hesitated, he immediately offered a discount. He told himself he was being flexible. What he was really being was afraid they would walk away. One day, after losing sleep over a demanding client who still wasn't satisfied despite the discount, he made a decision. He set a clear price. No apologies. No justification, just confidence. Some clients left. But the ones who stayed treated him completely differently. They respected his boundaries. They valued his time. They trusted his expertise more, not less. Because when you value yourself clearly, others respond to that clarity. And this applies everywhere. When you tolerate disrespectful jokes just to fit in, when you accept unrealistic deadlines without pushing back, when you agree to things that drain you just to avoid conflict, you train people how to treat you. And here's the powerful truth. People don't test strong boundaries for long. They either adjust or they exit. Both outcomes are victories, because the people who adjust are aligned with your standards. And the people who exit were never aligned to begin with. This rule isn't about becoming rigid or cold. It's about becoming intentional. It's about saying, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I will contribute. And this is what I will not tolerate, calmly, clearly, consistently. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to explain excessively. You don't need to convince anyone. The strongest position you can hold is quiet certainty. And when you hold it long enough, something surprising happens. The very people you were afraid of losing start respecting you more. Because deep down, everyone admires someone who refuses to abandon themselves. Let's move into something even more subtle, how this rule changes the way you see yourself. Because before the world respects you, you have to trust yourself. Every time you betray your own standards to keep the peace, something small breaks inside. It's quiet. No one else hears it. But you do. And over time, those small fractures turn into self-doubt. You start questioning your instincts. You hesitate before speaking. You overthink simple decisions. Not because you're incapable, but because you've trained yourself not to believe your own voice. And when you don't believe your own voice, why should anyone else? Self-trust is built the same way physical strength is built, through repetition under resistance. Every time you say what you genuinely think, respectfully and clearly, you reinforce that muscle. Every time you hold a boundary without guilt, you strengthen it. Every time you choose alignment over approval, you add weight to your character. And character is heavy. It has gravity. Have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and the energy shifts? They're not trying to dominate. They're not loud, but there's a steadiness about them. That steadiness comes from internal alignment. They are not at war with themselves. There was a senior executive who once shared a simple habit. Before every major decision, he would ask himself one question. If this decision were printed on the front page tomorrow, would I be proud of it? That question forced clarity. It eliminated shortcuts. It eliminated hidden compromises. It eliminated decisions driven by fear. And because he consistently answered that question honestly, people trusted him with larger and larger responsibilities. Not because he was flawless, but because he was transparent, first with himself, then with others. When you live in alignment, your mind becomes quieter. You don't replay conversations wondering if you said too much or too little. You don't feel the tension of pretending. You don't feel the exhaustion of performance. You feel stable, and stability radiates outward. Here's the paradox: the more you try to control how others see you, the more unstable you become. But the more you focus on being internally consistent, the less you need to control perception. Because perception naturally follows integrity. The rule we started with, never negotiate your values for approval, is not just about external respect, it's about internal peace. And when you have internal peace, your voice slows down, your posture changes, your decisions sharpen, you stop chasing validation, you start embodying conviction. And that is when people begin to see you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because you finally believe you deserve it. Now let's talk about the advanced level of this rule. What happens when your values are challenged publicly? It's one thing to hold a boundary in private. It's another thing to hold it when everyone is watching. Public pressure amplifies fear. Your heart beats faster. Your thoughts race. You imagine worst-case scenarios: embarrassment, rejection, isolation. And in that moment, most people default to safety. They soften their position. They laugh it off. They say, it's fine. But leadership is revealed in public tension. There was a board meeting where a senior member made a dismissive comment about a junior employee's idea. The room chuckled lightly. No one wanted conflict. It would have been easy to move on. But one person calmly said, I think the idea deserves consideration. Let's evaluate it based on merit, not seniority. The room went silent. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't aggressive. It was composed. But it shifted the standard. That single sentence redefined the culture more than any mission statement ever could, because values spoken under pressure become norms. When you defend fairness publicly, people remember. When you uphold integrity publicly, people adjust. When you remain calm while others are reactive, people recalibrate. This is where influence multiplies. Most people believe influence comes from titles. It doesn't. It comes from predictable courage. Predictable courage means people know that when something crosses a line, you will address it respectfully, but firmly. And here's the key: tone determines power. If you respond with anger, people focus on your emotion. If you respond with insecurity, people focus on your weakness. But if you respond with calm clarity, people focus on your principle. Calm clarity is unshakable. It says, I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here to protect a standard. There was a teacher who once refused to inflate grades, despite pressure from parents and administrators. It would have made everyone happier in the short term. But she believed grades should reflect mastery, not comfort. She received complaints. She faced uncomfortable conversations. But over time, students worked harder in her class. They trusted her evaluations. They knew excellence meant something. And years later, many of them returned to thank her. Not for being easy, but for being consistent. When you uphold your values publicly, you create psychological safety. People know the rules won't change based on politics or popularity. That's rare, and rarity commands respect. The advanced level of this rule isn't loud defiance. It's composed alignment under observation. And when others see that you don't fold under the spotlight, they stop testing your foundation. Because they understand something powerful: you are not performing. You are anchored. Now let's explore how this rule transforms relationships, both personal and professional. When you stop negotiating your values for approval, the people around you start showing up differently. Some leave, and that's a gift. They were never aligned with who you truly are. Others stay, and they stay with more loyalty, more trust, and more authenticity. Think about this: every time you say yes to something you shouldn't, You send a silent message to everyone watching. I can be swayed. My principles are flexible. My boundaries are negotiable. People pick up on it immediately. They don't always confront it directly, but they sense it. And unconsciously, they adjust their behavior to take advantage of it. But when you consistently honor your values, your relationships shift. The energy changes. People stop trying to manipulate you or test your limits. They stop assuming that because you're agreeable once, you'll be agreeable again. They begin to approach you with respect. There was a young leader who constantly overextended himself to please colleagues and superiors. He thought being helpful would make people like him, but instead it created exhaustion, resentment, and a subtle lack of trust. People didn't value his time because he never valued it himself. One day, he made a conscious change. He started saying no when a request conflicted with his priorities. He started setting clear boundaries and communicating them respectfully. At first, some people pushed back. They tried to test his limits, but he stayed consistent. Within weeks, something remarkable happened. The same colleagues who once demanded too much started showing initiative. They respected his time. They sought his input because it mattered, not because he was always available. His relationships strengthened, not superficially, but at a deep, authentic level. This is the hidden power of the rule. It doesn't just change how people see you externally. It changes the quality of your connections. It filters out shallow interactions and amplifies meaningful ones. Respect becomes a foundation, loyalty becomes a natural outcome. Trust becomes unshakable, and influence is no longer forced, it emerges organically. You stop being a performer in your own life. You stop bending for approval. You stop compromising yourself to avoid tension. And in doing so, you invite others to rise to your level, to meet you where you stand, not where you kneel. This is the tipping point. When you apply this rule consistently, your network, your team, your family, your friends, they all begin to respond to your alignment rather than your compliance. And the most profound lesson of all, the people who stay aligned with you aren't just around for the victories. They're around because they trust the person you've become. When you stop negotiating your values for approval, your relationships don't just survive, they thrive. When you stop bending for approval, something remarkable happens inside you. Reclaim your decision-making power. You stop letting external pressures dictate your actions, and you begin acting from clarity. Every choice becomes intentional, every boundary becomes a lesson, and every moment of discomfort becomes a training ground for strength. Most people think growth comes from learning new skills, attending seminars, or reading more books. That's part of it. But the deeper, faster growth comes from resisting the urge to shrink yourself, to fit the expectations of others. Every time you hold your ground, your confidence compounds. Every time you act aligned rather than agreeable, your resilience grows. Think of it like a muscle. Every time you lift a weight, it gets stronger. Every time you say no when it matters, you strengthen your identity. And over time, those small moments of resistance build into unshakable character. There was a professional who spent years trying to please his boss, coworkers, and clients. He said yes to everything, overcommitted constantly, and tried to fit into roles that weren't aligned with his skills. He felt exhausted, invisible, and frustrated. One day, he decided to implement a small but deliberate change. He would only say yes to requests aligned with his purpose and values. At first, it was uncomfortable. He worried about losing favor, losing opportunities, or creating tension. But he stayed consistent. Within months, his focus sharpened. His productivity increased. People who genuinely valued his expertise sought him out. Doors that never opened before began to appear. And here's the kicker: the respect he earned wasn't granted by others. It emerged naturally from his integrity. Growth, you see, isn't just what you achieve. It's who you become in the process. And when you stop negotiating your values for approval, you become someone predictable, reliable, and trustworthy. A person capable of taking on challenges others wouldn't dare touch. The world rewards people who are anchored, not malleable. It doesn't just notice skill or intelligence, it notices consistency under pressure, calmness under scrutiny, and courage under temptation. Every time you choose alignment over approval, you teach yourself and everyone around you an important truth: real power is not in winning people's favor. It's in standing firm in the truth of who you are, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, and even when it's inconvenient. This is where leaders, innovators, and influencers are born, not from following trends or seeking approval, but from the quiet, consistent courage to honor their own values above all else. When you live this way, growth isn't accidental, it's inevitable. Now we arrive at the final truth, the one rule that changes everything. Here's what it comes down to: your life, your influence, and the respect you receive are all reflections of the choices you make when no one is watching, and the courage you show when everyone is watching. Stop negotiating your values for approval. Not sometimes, not most of the time, every time. When you consistently honor your principles, you send a powerful signal to the world. I am anchored. I am reliable. I am not here to please you. I am here to stand firm in who I am. And the incredible thing, the world responds. Doors open, trust deepens, influence multiplies, relationships transform, opportunities align. People stop testing you because they sense your foundation is unshakable. This is the culmination of everything we've explored. Internal clarity creates external respect. Boundaries create trust. Calm conviction creates influence. Every choice to stay aligned compounds, building character, credibility, and presence that no one can take away. There will be moments of fear. There will be pressure to compromise. There will be criticism, pushback, and even rejection. But these are not signals to fold. They're signals that you are on the right path. Because when you stand firm, you naturally filter out what is weak and attract what is strong. Think about the life you want, the people you want around you, the opportunities you deserve. None of it comes from bending to please others. It comes from the courage to say no to what doesn't align, even when it costs you temporarily, and yes to what reinforces your integrity, even when it's uncomfortable. Respect is not given. It's earned silently, steadily, without showmanship. It grows from every moment you choose alignment over approval, authenticity over convenience, courage over comfort. This is more than a rule. It's a lifestyle, a mindset, a quiet revolution in how you navigate the world. So the question you must ask yourself now is simple. Will you continue adjusting to fit in, or will you anchor yourself in your values and let the world adapt to the person you've chosen to be? Your answer will define everything. Your integrity, your influence, your legacy. And it all starts with one decision. Never negotiate your values for approval. Stand firm. Stay aligned. Live unshakable. That is how the world begins to see you differently. That is how respect becomes inevitable. That is how greatness quietly, powerfully, unmistakably unfolds.